Hamas really didn't want to make a deal.
Israel was given the green light to finish off Hamas. The French and the British at the same time are competing over who loves Islam more. Europeans have basically decided to collectively commit suicide. The caliphate is planned to be established on the territory of the European Union by the year 2035. First, we'll imprison Obama's security officials, then a close circle of criminals from Biden's White House. It looks like Hunter Biden is planning to run for president of the United States in 2028, but it's not yet clear from which party. And Elon Musk said that he's tired of being involved in politics and won't be doing it anymore. Well, thank God. There's a huge amount of astonishing information, especially from the investigation by the famous John Sullivan, who amazed the deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, with his findings. Let's listen to Solomon closer to the end. The British Prime Minister is under internal pressure. There are more mosques in his country than in Saudi Arabia. That's why he has to lie, twist things, and dance around as soon as he's told, like being at 2 weddings at once. So this is Keir Starmer's false statement.
But Israel must allow aid to be delivered by land to put an end to the famine in Gaza. The situation is desperate. We are working with Jordan to deliver aid to Gaza. We are urgently accelerating efforts to evacuate children in need of critical medical care to the United Kingdom for treatment. I am determined to find a path to peace.
Interestingly, it was not the White House that responded to him officially, but former United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Prime Minister Starmer's statement is just...
Prime Minister Starmer's statement is fundamentally false. Israelis, who are fighting an enemy trying to kill them, are providing food to the residents of Gaza during the war. As a historical fact, feeding your enemy and their civilians while you're still at war with them, that's really something.
I thought, what about the British? When they were bombing Berlin, were they at the same time bringing food and medicine to the people of Berlin? Or when, let's say, they were carpet bombing Dresden and Frankfurt? When the British were bombing civilians to spread panic and lower the morale of the Germans? So, is it okay to do that to Germans but not to Arabs? Or is it okay for the British, but not for the Jews? The good news is that Trump, may his name be exalted, will strike a blow against the European anti-Semites and so on.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump has just made an absolutely stunning statement regarding the European Union, and now they have to make a rather important decision. You see, as you all know, over the past 10 years or so, Europe has been literally flooded with immigrants from Africa and the Middle East. And as a result, well, let's just say Europe has changed quite a lot.
Now President Trump is unhappy about this. He knows firsthand how bad endless waves of unchecked, culturally incompatible immigrants can be.
And he also knows that in many ways, Europeans really are some of our closest allies. Which means he doesn't want to let them destroy themselves, which is exactly what's happening.
And that's why President Trump has actually taken it upon himself to try to save Europe.
In fact, look at what he said about it this morning.
This is Matt Moores, popular among young people for his podcast. His audience believes he chooses topics that interest them very accurately.
Regarding immigration, you better pull yourself together, otherwise you won't have Europe anymore. You need to get it together. And last month, no one entered our country. No one.
We closed it. We got rid of a lot of bad people who got in there. With Biden was a complete failure. And what he allowed to happen. But you are allowing this to happen in your countries. And you must stop this terrible invasion that is happening in Europe, in many countries of Europe. Some people, some leaders, did not allow this. And they are not getting the recognition they deserve.
I could name them for you right now, but I don't want to embarrass the others.
But stop it. This emigration is killing Europe.
Guys, you've decided to commit suicide. This is your stinking made-up Stasi and KGB European Union. For those unfamiliar, read Bukovsky, who has compiled all the relevant documents on this subject. Who came up with it, who supported it, who financed it, what kind of idiotic idea were they pushing, and why?
All right, so friends, President Trump is absolutely right about all of this. But you know what? How about we talk about what he's actually doing here? This hasn't gotten much media coverage. But President Trump is actually using his current trade negotiations with the European Union to try to force Europe to shut down their open immigration policy. And the reason he's doing this is because, as I said earlier, if Europe turns into a third-rate dump, as has been happening over the last decade or so, it will be bad not just for them, but for all of us. Here in the United States of America, really, for a lot of reasons.
J.T. Vance explained to Europeans in simple terms what they've gotten themselves into. I really believe that we have a great deal.
I truly believe that we have a lot in common with Europe, and I don't. You know, yes, Europeans sometimes annoy me, and yes, I don't agree with them on some issues. But we have to remember that this is the cradle of Western civilization. The whole idea of Christian civilization, which led to the founding of the United States of America, was formed in Europe. Cultural ties, religious ties, these things will last longer than political disagreements. But I think that Europe, and honestly, I would have said this about America a year ago, but Europe, I think, risks committing civilizational suicide. Many countries cannot or do not want to control their borders. You see how they are starting to resist this, and that's good. You see how they are starting to restrict their citizens' freedom of speech.
Even when these citizens protest against things like the border incursion, which led to the election of Donald Trump and a number of European leaders.
So look, I want Europe to prosper. I want them to be an important ally. Part of that is for Europe to respect its own people, to respect its own sovereignty, and America can't do that job for them.
In my opinion, it's crystal clear. According to all demographic forecasts, in the next 20 years, you will become a caliphate, and Sharia will become your law. Churches. Naturally, they will be burned down by someone, no one knows who, set on fire. Parliaments will close, women won't be seen under the chador. Men will get down on all fours 5 times a day with their butts up and shout that by force Allah is great, Allahu Akbar.
If you have a country like Germany where several more million immigrants from countries that are completely culturally incompatible with Germany arrive, then it doesn't matter what I think about Europe. Germany will destroy itself, and I hope they don't do that because I love Germany and I want Germany to prosper.
Germans, Britons, and Swedes are close to self-destruction.
Mass immigration is insane, and it will lead to the destruction of any country that allows uncontrolled mass immigration. That country will simply cease to exist.
Did you recognize him? This is the genius of our time, Elon Musk. Why did one of the 2 great American parties start moving toward European-style suicide? What happened?
The Democratic Party is completely radicalized. It's a party of extremists.
They prioritize the rights of illegal immigrants over the lives of American citizens.
So, of course, we know and understand that the Democrats want to flood the country with illegals because it gives them extra seats in Congress, changes the distribution, and expands their political power.
By birthright, all their children automatically become citizens.
So, all these things, in the Democrats' opinion, will increase their political power, expand the welfare state, increase dependency, and strengthen it.
For example, the power of the teachers' union, because millions of illegal immigrants receive free education in public schools. So we understand all these things, but I think on a deeper level, on a much deeper level. Sean, they hate America. At least they hate the America that you and I know, the America that our founders gave us. And they want to end this America and create a new communist hellhole. And they believe that open borders are the way to achieve that.
That is the dream of getting something for nothing, wild, uncontrollable envy toward those who have succeeded in ways they could only dream of. That's why the idea of creating this American way of becoming rich was replaced with taking away and redistributing, calling it by different but very beautiful names. They don't want to make things better for us, they want to make things worse for us, and the worse it gets, the more pleasure they get from it.
That's the reality.
None of these subversive ultra-left radical progressives advocate for open borders because they think it will actually make things better.
No, it's the opposite. They want open borders because they actually want the Western world to collapse on its own. So, friends, given that all of this is true, and we know that it's 100% true, let's be grateful that finally something is being done. And that finally, we're not only making America great again, but also making Europe great again.
I wonder how Trump is putting out military conflicts all over the world. He simply announces that the United States will not import goods from countries at war.
President Trump says he called the leaders of Thailand and Cambodia to urge them to stop the fighting that broke out earlier this week.
Warning that he would not make a trade deal with either country while the conflict continues, Trump said in a social media post on Saturday.
We happen to be in trade negotiations with both countries right now, but we don't want to make any deals with either country if they are at war, and I told them that.
Trump said that he spoke with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Monet and Acting Prime Minister Puntum Vichaychigun,
And that both leaders expressed support for, quote, an immediate ceasefire.
And about this man, idiots in the Russian and Ukrainian press say that he spat on the killed Ukrainians and Russians and is only interested in profit. Yesterday, for example, Shevchenko Maxim, yes, was repeating this nonsense again, but he's an idiot. Well, as they say, it's forgivable for him in this regard. But some of the others should be smarter, though maybe not. Maybe they're not smarter. Maybe they're all even dumber. Just like those who shout that Israel wants to destroy Palestinian temples, how about a few thousand Hamas members marching out of Gaza in orderly rows and handing over the hostages who are still alive? And the war would end that very day? Unlike in Ukraine, the Arabs have been bombing and killing Israelis for 80 years. And just recently, 1,200 people were brutally killed, and 300 were taken as hostages into underground captivity, like in the Middle Ages.
Welcome to the News Hour.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said today he is exploring other options for ceasefire talks with Hamas.
This occurred after Israel and the United States pulled their negotiators from the Qatar talks yesterday.
And this reflects the statement of White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who said that Hamas is showing, as he put it, a lack of willingness to reach an agreement. Hamas claims that the talks will resume next week, but as he was leaving the White House, President Trump proposed today that Israel's sole choice is to escalate the conflict.
The only remaining way to get the hostages back is to escalate the war. All right, the Germans and the British, along with the Swedes and the Belgians, are ending their country's lives by suicide. And what about the Democratic Party of the United States? The Wall Street Journal, which became left-leaning after Murdoch's children took over his media conglomerate, conducted a public survey.
Wait until you see this. So, a new Wall Street Journal poll shows that Democrats have the lowest rating among voters in 35 years.
The journal found that the image of the Democratic Party has deteriorated to its lowest level in more than 3 decades.
And voters believe that Republicans handle almost all the issues affecting their daily lives better. This is a quote. The poll shows that as many as 63% of registered voters view Democrats unfavorably, while only 33% have a positive impression, which is the lowest rating since 1993.
I've already told you that today, after all the revelations, after all the news, after all the information, people can still vote for the Democrats. I thought it was 2, but then I added 1 more. There are 3 categories of people. First, idiots. Second, scoundrels. And third, those who have lost their minds. And in the scoundrel category are both those who rob and those who get a share of the loot from the robbers in exchange for their votes. I also told you earlier that these three categories make up from a quarter to a third of the country's population, and I was glad that there aren't more of them, which confirmed my words. 30% of the population wants the Democrats to run America's life. They gave it to those whom the common people envy and divided it among those who can't earn for themselves but want to live like those who worked hard, took risks, studied, and invented things.
It also showed that voters trust Republicans more than Democrats. By 10 points on inflation, by 17 points on immigration, and by 17 points on the issue of illegal immigrants.
One of the surprising findings, however, was voters' disapproval of Trump's tariffs by 17 points, which is simply astonishing because Trump's tariff policy provided a much-needed source of revenue for the United States government.
We have more than $36 trillion in debt. That's a lot of money. We don't have enough revenue to even pay our bills.
The annual United States government deficit exceeds $2 trillion.
Trump's tariffs have already added more than $200 billion to our country's cash flow in just a few months.
Estimates show that tariff revenues amount to more than $600 billion a year. That's what's expected. And very soon, some of that money might come back to you as a refund or a stimulus check. Let me explain.
The United States has a debt, a national debt in the trillions. The interest payments alone are bigger than the budgets of most countries in the world. The tariffs that Trump has imposed now did not raise the prices of goods, as most people feared, but they do bring revenue into the country for the government. So, well, coffers of money, right? With which you can pay off debts. And Trump, understanding the problem, said that he wants to distribute part of the collected tariffs among the population so that people feel that the tariffs benefit them, that they don't just pass them by, that the money actually ends up in their pockets.
Mr. President, with the increase in revenues and all these incomes amounting to tens and tens of trillions of dollars, do you think there is a possibility of returning part of this money
to the American public? We are really thinking about it. We are getting so much money that we are considering a small return, but the main thing we want to do is pay off the debt. We are considering a return. That's an excellent question. But it became big news. We are thinking about a return because we are getting so much money from tariffs that a small return for people with a certain income level could be very good.
The Democratic Party is in a position where no one believes they can return to power in 26 or even in 28. And since that's the case, donors don't want to give them money. Well, finances are usually invested where you can get a return. I'll give you money for your election campaign, and when you become mayor, governor, or an oligarch senator, you'll help me get a profitable contract, and my capital will come back to me. And if you don't have a chance, why should I throw money down the drain?
And going into the midterms next year?
And as the midterms approach next year, the Democrats are facing not only bad polls, they are also finding it nearly impossible to raise money, something they have historically been much better at than the Republicans. Last week, the Republican National Committee had $83 million in cash, while the Democratic National Committee had less than $11 million. Their fundraising efforts are failing. It seems that none of the usual major Democratic donors are even showing up at these events anymore. Dan Tarantine, a longtime Democratic lobbyist and Democrat who is sounding the alarm about the current state of the Democratic Party, says, "We don't have any agenda at all," he says. "If we got power, I couldn't even tell you what we would do with it." Look, listen, we obviously have a bunch of problems too, right? I mean, you talked about this earlier. We don't have any agenda at all. If we got power, I couldn't say what we want to do.
We're getting hit on all fronts.
In fundraising, the Republican National Committee had $83 million last month. We have $13 million. Outside groups, we're spending $20 million to understand men. I don't know how many autopsies we have on one corpse. The Republicans are stockpiling money. The worst part, Jesse, is voter registration, where Trump made a surge last year from 2023 to 2024. That was our foundation, right? That's what we used to do. Right now, we're behind in all those swing states.
If we can't raise money and register new voters, we're going to have big problems.
The Democrats can't, no matter how many times you ask them, they can't explain what they'll do if they get into power. They can't persuade donors to give money, and they can't convince young people to join their party. No one knows their exact plans. Every day, the Democrats get slapped in the face again and again. Barack Obama's and his people's dirty deeds are being exposed. And the manipulations by Joe Biden's aides, as well as the theft and dishonesty of Democratic Party officials at all its branches and levels. Look at what the outstanding journalist John Salomon is doing. He's an outstanding journalist. He digs up so much. He's so skilled. He really knows how to figure things out. I won't talk about him anymore. I've already talked about him. In fact, I've shown him several times. So John Salomon is talking about the baseness of the heads of law enforcement agencies. Obama.
John Brennan will be indicted soon. That's what Dan is talking about. Look.
Listen, I think that in the next week or two, we'll see a new revelation about Brennan's behavior.
Along with James Comey, attempts were made to include the dirty dossier in the intelligence assessment to seize it.
But also in his handling of a source who appears to have credible information. According to the information provided, the person in question did not have access to Vladimir Putin and could not know Putin's thoughts.
CIA directors usually don't work directly with sources. That's the job of operations officers.
So why does Brennan have a source? Who is this source and what was his actual access? And what did the professionals at the CIA think about this access?
I think this will become an area of great interest at the beginning of the criminal investigation.
I think we will also be closely watching the second point.
What was Jack Smith looking for when he searched Donald Trump's house in Mar-a-Lago in 2022?
What were they looking for in that raid, and is there any connection to the period of 2016?
When did we submit dirty dossiers to the Intelligence Committee, seize intelligence products, and lie to the courts, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and the American public?
I think these are two major events that we'll learn more about in the next couple of weeks.
So the CIA chief is an organization and activity that by law should be outside the United States. They can do something here only with special permission. Inside the country, we have the FBI and various other intelligence agencies, departments, and ministries. So the CIA got involved inside our country by fighting against the president, elected by the people of the United States, with the goal of removing him from the office to which he was elected. Who? Well, it was us who elected him. Well, the Democrats didn't expect Hillary to lose, of course, and they missed the moment before the election, but they decided to remove Trump after the election. That is acting like a banana republic. We constantly get messages on our channel saying that no one will be punished, with comments like, yeah, they'll just find a scapegoat or a fall guy. So the deputy director of the FBI, Dan Badzina, made it clear through his post on X that two top officials from the CIA and National Intelligence were doing something that left him astonished and disgusted. And as he wrote, we'll find out soon too.
Unbelievable.
John Brennan will most likely be the first one to be arrested.
We'll see him, and then James Clapper. It looks like the deputy director of the FBI just confirmed it.
For us, maybe?
Ladies and gentlemen, everything will be different from what we imagine. But for today, it's clear that Obama seems to be losing the halo of a saint that, so to speak, was placed on him by the Democrats. The Clinton family could be prosecuted because of Epstein. The leadership of Obama's law enforcement agencies will go to trial, and Biden's entire inner cabinet will be accused of selling pardons, which they signed without saying a word to their boss, the president. It's not surprising, really, that not giving them money and not joining their party is, so to speak, the slogan of today's America. And Trump has had tremendous successes both inside and outside the country. Ladies and gentlemen, that's in just around 183 or 184 days. So much so that it's almost impossible to believe he's only been in the White House for 6 months. A new era has begun, and the whole country can feel it. And that's why people have a different attitude. That's why they look to the future with optimism. So when they're asked whether the country is on the right path or not, more than 60% say yes, yes, of course, yes. Look at the stock market. Look at what's happening with the numbers. Look at people who had money in pensions and all sorts of savings and so on. How everything is growing insanely for them. Everything is growing like crazy. So, America, what Trump said, you'll get tired of it, as he said. You'll get tired of our victories, too. Well, that's debatable. I don't think we'll get tired, but at least he did what he promised. And the very, very last thing. And every time you read or listen to a Democrat, or Russian speakers, or English speakers, I'm sure it's the same in other languages too. As soon as it's a Democrat, right away it's that one sticky category, remember? Yes, I've already figured out which one they always use. But he didn't do this. He didn't bring peace to Ukraine. Yes, gentlemen, average. I didn't keep track, honestly. I just delved into various informational spaces, so to speak. And I found out that, on average, American and Western politicians fulfill about 45% of their promises. Trump has an astonishing, unmatched 72%. Yes, 28% UI. Either hasn't done yet or couldn't do for some reason. It's absolutely the same. I believe I mentioned this a day or two ago. When a person comes in, looks at a glass of water and says, "It's not completely full, see, it's a little bit empty." Yes, it's a little bit empty. Ladies and gentlemen, nobody is God. Nobody. Well, nobody. There is God, but we are not. That's basically it. Let's part ways here, and until next time. Subtitles created by